Julia Lee, an equities analyst from Bell Direct, and today we're joined by Richard Hemming from Under the Radar to talk about stocks, sectors and things that have caught his eye. So let's start off by thanking Richard for joining us today. And Richard, I guess I wanted to start by talking about the mining services area. It has been heavily battered, but when there have been moves, there have been some strong moves as well. So are there any stocks that you would consider in the mining services space at the moment?
Well, there haven't been really big moves on the upside, mainly on the downside, but definitely mining services isn't for the faint-hearted, and everyone knows that China is going through a slowdown from its rapid growth phase. But we look for companies that are cashed up and are certainly cutting costs. So they're cutting their cloth to fit the, to fit the conditions. And on this front, we've actually doubled the money on one of them, GR Engineering. And that's because they've won contracts. So they were trading on a very cheap PE, and they've been re-rated, having won some big contracts with Sirius and Western Areas. And their focus is base metals, which is also been good.
The other area that has many people interested is the biotech space. There are some really interesting ideas coming out of some Australian biotech companies. Are there any stocks that interest you in this space?
Well, everyone's looking at this area because it's obviously a competitive strength for Australia being so isolated, but technology can be exported very cheaply, and now with the Australian dollar so cheap, you get the added benefit of the exchange. We tend to focus more on the med tech side of things rather than the biotech. So that what I'm talking about is basically things that don't metabolize. So if you take a pill or something that's going to metabolize in your bloodstream, but med tech's like a hip replacement, or ImpediMed, which is one stock that we've advocated buying. That's they do a diagnostic to test for lymphedema, and right now we're actually one of our favourites is Osprey Medical, and they do a product which reduces the amount of contrast or dye that goes into the body when you're doing a heart operation.
So it sounds like you'd rather focus in on med tech stocks rather than companies and biotechs that are looking at developing drugs. Why is that?
Well, Alchemia, some of the big Genentech, some of the big companies in the biotech space have been, in biologics or super drugs. But the risk in that side of things is a lot higher because the FDA just isn't improving drugs. It approves something like 20 molecules a year, which is not much at all considering the billions and billions of dollars spent and the thousands of drugs that are put forward for approval. So medtech, you get a much higher, faster approval rate, and where the risk is on this side of things is more on the IP. So that someone comes over the top. But like once you get a handle on the risks, then once they get the product marketed properly, then there is the big potential there. But it's just not quite the same sort of sexy science that some people love.
And finally, are there any interesting stocks or trends that you're watching at the moment?
Well, we've been looking at retail just because one of the big surprises of the reporting season so far, that's in its infancy, was JB Hi-Fi, and they didn't produce a spectacular result, but there was a bit of improvement on some of their products, like computer-related products, that gave the market a lot more hope. And I think that if you look at the economy, well, there's a lot of dour statistics, like unemployment's at a sort of multi-year high at 6.7% and forecast to go higher. Economic growth's below the OECD average at around 2.5%. But we think that, from looking at the ABS statistics and talking to a few people that are interested in this sort of area, population growth is a key driver for consumer spending, and population growth is at a 15% is 15% higher than the sort of 34-year average. So this is a big factor that we think has been overlooked by the market until now.
That was Richard Hemming from Under the Radar. Lots of ideas there, from GR Engineering in the mining services space to companies like Osprey Medical, as well as ImpediMed in the biotech space, and of course a contrarian view also on the retailers. I hope you've enjoyed our interview today, and please join us next time. I'm Julia Lee from Bell Direct.